Welcome back to Dusk Chapters. Dim the lights, settle in, and let the day fall away. Tonight's story is an old tale, one that has been told at firesides and by candlelight for longer than anyone can remember. The story of a golden ball, a quiet forest well, and a small green frog who was not quite what he seemed. So let your shoulders soften into the pillow, let your breath grow slow, and let your thoughts drift gently into the cool green hush of the deep old woods. In the old days, when wishing still sometimes helped, there lived a king who had many daughters, and each of them was lovely in her own way. But the youngest was so fair that even the sun itself, which had seen so many beautiful things in its long journey across the sky, paused for a moment of wonder each time it touched her face. The castle where she lived stood at the edge of a great forest, a forest so old and so deep that its heart had never been fully explored, where the trees grew thick and tall and let down their green light in soft, dappled coins upon the mossy ground. And in the very middle of that forest, beneath the widest, oldest tree, there was a fountain, small and clear, its water so still and so cool that it seemed to hold the whole sky inside it. And when the days grew warm, the young princess loved nothing better than to walk out to that quiet place and sit upon its mossy rim, all alone, listening to the leaves whisper far above her. She had a favorite plaything, a golden ball, and when she grew a little bored, or simply wanted to feel the pleasure of something rising and falling in the soft afternoon light, she would toss it up above her head and catch it again as it fell, over and over, the gold of it catching the sun each time it turned, so that it seemed almost like a small captured star, tumbling gently through her fingers and back up into the light. It was her favorite toy in all the world, and she never tired of this simple game. But on this particular afternoon, as the lights slanted long and gold through the branches and the birds sang their slow, drowsy evening songs, the ball slipped just slightly from her hand as it fell, brushing her fingertips instead of landing safely in her palm, and it rolled, softly, almost lazily, as if it too were tired and ready for rest, along the grass and down over the mossy stones, and disappeared with the smallest of splashes into the fountain's quiet water. The princess watched it go with wide eyes, and though the fountain was not so very deep, its water was so dark and so clear all at once that she could not see the bottom of it all. It seemed to fall away into some soft, endless dusk of its own, and no matter how far she leaned or how long she looked, the golden ball did not appear again. She began to weep then, but hers were not loud or frightened tears, only the slow, quiet tears of a child who has lost something dear, tears that fell as gently as the last light falling through the leaves, and she wept and wept until it seemed the whole forest had grown soft and blurred around her. It was then that she heard a small voice, calm and unhurried, speaking from somewhere near the water's edge. "What troubles you, little princess? Your tears could move even a stone to comfort you." She looked around, and there, resting upon a smooth gray rock at the water's rim, was a frog, his skin the deep green of the moss around him, his eyes calm and round and gently curious, watching her without any fear at all. "Oh, it's only you, old water splasher," she said softly, wiping her eyes. "I am crying because my golden ball has fallen into the fountain, and it has sunk so deep that I cannot see it anymore." The frog considered this for a long moment, blinking slowly, the way frogs do, as though he were thinking through the whole quiet history of the forest before he answered. "Do not weep any longer," he said at last. "I believe I can help you. But tell me first, what will you give me if I bring your golden plaything back up to you?" The princess thought of all the things she owned, her fine dresses, her pearls, the golden crown she wore upon feast days, and she offered them freely, one after another, for none of them seemed so very precious to her in that moment, not compared to the sadness of her lost ball. But the frog only shook his small head, slowly side to side. "Your pearls and your jewels and your fine golden crown? I have no use for such things," he said. "But if you would only care for me and let me be your companion, if you would let me sit beside you at your own little table and eat from your own little golden plate and drink from your own little cup, and if you would let me sleep upon your own small pillow at night, if you promise me these things, then I will go down into the water and bring your golden ball back up to you." It seemed such a small and simple thing to promise, and such a very great thing to have her ball returned, that the princess said yes at once, the way we sometimes agree to things quickly in the soft rush of relief, without quite letting the words settle all the way down into our hearts. "Yes, yes," she said, "I promise all of it. Only please bring me back my ball." But even as she said it, in some quiet corner of her mind, she thought, what a foolish thing this little frog is saying. As if he could ever truly leave his fountain and his lily pads to come and sit at my table, or leave his cool wet stones to sleep upon my bed. Frogs live in the water, croaking with their own kind, and surely, she thought, he cannot really mean to keep me to my promise. But the frog, satisfied, dipped his head once beneath the water and disappeared with barely a ripple, down into that soft, dark quiet. And after a little while, long enough that the princess had almost begun to wonder, he rose again to the surface, the golden ball held gently in his mouth, and he swam to the fountain's edge and set it down upon the grass before her. Oh, how her heart lifted at the sight of it! She snatched it up at once, feeling the old, familiar warmth of the gold beneath her fingers, and without a single backward glance, without so much as a word of thanks, she turned and ran, light and quick as the evening breeze, back toward the castle, her ball held close against her chest, and the little frog's voice calling gently after her, "Wait, princess, wait for me. I cannot run as you do," faded softly behind her into the hush of the trees, unheard, or perhaps simply unheeded, as she disappeared through the castle gates. The next evening, as the princess sat at the long table with her father the king and all her sisters, the golden plates gleaming softly in the candlelight and the quiet murmur of supper filling the hall, there came a strange sound from the great stone steps outside, a soft, wet, padding sound, climbing steadily upward, step by step, and then at the door a small, polite knocking, and a voice that called out clearly, "Youngest daughter of the king, open the door for me." The princess rose, curious, and when she opened the door and saw the little green frog sitting there upon the threshold, patient and calm, she felt her heart give a small, cold drop, and quickly, without meaning to be unkind, only startled, she shut the door again and returned to her seat, though her hands trembled just slightly around her cup. Her father, noticing her pale face, asked gently what had frightened her, and so she told him the whole story, the golden ball, the fountain, the promise she had made so quickly and so lightly, never believing the little frog could climb out of his cool green world and come all this way to hold her to it. And even as she finished speaking, the knock came again, softer this time, and the small voice repeated its quiet request. "Youngest daughter of the king, open the door for me. Have you forgotten what you promised me yesterday, beside the cool fountain water?" The king, who was a wise and gentle father, looked at his youngest daughter with kind but steady eyes. "My child," he said, "what you have promised, you must keep. Go now and let him in." So she went, though slowly, and opened the door, and the little frog hopped in after her, following her all the way back to her chair. And when she sat down again, he said, in his calm, unhurried way, "Lift me up beside you, if you please." She hesitated, but her father's eyes were upon her, So she lifted the little frog and set him gently upon the chair beside her own. Once there, he looked toward her golden plate and said, "Now push your little plate a bit closer so that we may eat together." She did, though she found she had little appetite of her own that evening, and the frog ate his fill in slow, contented bites, while she only watched the candle flames flicker and sway, and thought of the cool fountain far off in the darkening woods. When the little frog had eaten enough, he said, gently, "Now I'm tired, little princess, and I would like to rest. Carry me up to your room, and let us lie down together in your soft bed, for that too was part of your promise." At this, the princess felt her eyes fill with tears again, quiet ones, for the little frog seemed so cold and so strange to her, so far from the silk and lavender of her own soft bed. But her father spoke once more, kindly but firmly. "The one who helped you in your time of need should not be scorned by you now," he said. "A promise made must be a promise kept, my dear one." And so, though her heart was heavy, she lifted the little frog in both her hands and carried him slowly up the winding stairs to her own quiet room, where the moonlight lay in long silver bars across the floor, and she set him down, ever so gently, in the farthest corner of her pillow, as far from herself as the small space would allow, and she closed her eyes and let out a long, tired breath, and let the whole strange day finally slip away from her. But in the deep, hushed middle of that night, something in the room began to change. Perhaps it was the moonlight growing softer, or the wind outside settling into the trees, or perhaps it was simply that the moment of the promise's true keeping had finally, quietly arrived. But when the princess opened her eyes again, drawn by some gentle shift in the air beside her, she saw that the little green frog was no longer there at all. In his place, resting upon the pillow in the moonlight, was a young prince, looking at her with kind and grateful eyes, his face calm and open as a summer morning. He told her then, in a low, soft voice, that he had once been a prince himself, living in a bright kingdom far away, until a wicked enchantress, offended by some small slight, had cast a spell upon him and bound him into the shape of a frog, condemning him to live in the cool, dark water of the forest fountain until a princess should be willing to let him eat from her plate and rest upon her pillow, out of kindness and the keeping of a promise, and so break the spell at last. And now, he said gently, that she alone had freed him through her father's wisdom and her own faithful heart. The princess, though astonished, found that her fear had melted away like frost beneath a morning sun, and in its place there settled something warm and quiet and glad. And though the story, being so very old, moves quickly here, as old stories often do, it tells us that in the morning the king was overjoyed to learn all that had happened, and that the young prince and the princess, in time, came to care for each other deeply, the way two people do when they have shared a strange and gentle trial together. Not long after, a splendid carriage arrived at the castle gates, drawn by 8 white horses, all decked in white ostrich plumes and golden chains, sent by the prince's own kingdom to carry him home. The carriage was driven by the prince's own faithful servant, a man known as Henry, who had loved his master so dearly and grieved so long over his enchantment that, out of sorrow, he had once bound 3 iron bands around his own heart to keep it from breaking entirely with grief. But now, as the carriage carried the prince and his princess away together through the soft green light of the forest, past the very fountain where it had all begun, Henry felt his heart grow so light and so full of joy that, one by one, with 3 quiet sounds no louder than a branch settling in the wind, the iron bands loosened and fell away, for they were needed no longer. And so the prince and the princess traveled onward together, through the cool hush of the great forest, toward his kingdom and the long, peaceful life that waited for them there, while the fountain behind them settled back into its old stillness, holding the sky and its dark water just as it always had, keeping its quiet secrets the way deep water always does. That is the end of tonight's story. The candle is low now. The room is soft and warm, and there is nothing left to do but let your eyes close and your breathing slow and drift gently into your own deep and peaceful water. Sleep well, dear listener. Thank you for spending this quiet evening with Dusk Chapters, and I will be here waiting softly with another chapter whenever you are ready to return. Good night.